Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm sitting in for Alan Schimmel today as your host. We have a lot of stuff happening on TechStrong TV today. Lots of great interviews with some really smart folks in the industry, and want to kick things off with a conversation that Alan has with Janet Matsuda, who is with Sysdig. And as you know, Sysdig is all about Kubernetes security. So they're going to have a nice conversation about all of the integrations and partnerships that Sysdig has with AWS and how the companies are working together to help their customers in the Kubernetes space. After that, Alan has a conversation with Leo Schlossnagel of Circonus, and his company is all about log management, and they're going to have a conversation about some of the problems that they've noticed with observability and manageability at scale. It's easy for me to say. After that, Alan and Kasuke Kawaguchi, for those who don't know KK, he's the creator of Jenkins. He and Alan are going to be talking about what he's doing now at his new company, Launchable, and I am excited about that conversation in particular. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting one. We've got some news headlines for you. As always, we're going to be talking about some of the things that are happening on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. And then after that, I will have a nice conversation with Ryan Corey, who's the CEO and co-founder of a company called Cybrary. They just released the results of their first ever Cybersecurity Skills Gap report, and lots of interesting takeaways from that. So we're going to be talking about some of those results and what organizations can possibly glean from those results. Going to have a webinar preview. As always, we've got lots of webinars coming up on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. And we're going to talk about some of the 3 webinars that are coming up very soon. So all about Kubernetes and cloud native and DevOps related technology. So listen in for that for sure. And then we have Mike Vizard talking to Miska Kapanen from Mirantis about the rise of Kubernetes services across hybrid clouds. So please stay tuned. We have got a ton of stuff for you on today's edition of TechStrong TV, which we will kick off right after this commercial message. Hey, welcome back everybody to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. And kicking off today's lineup of interviews, we have Alan speaking with Janet Matsuda of Sysdig. Sysdig is a Kubernetes security focused company, and Janet is going to be talking about how her company is working with AWS in a number of integrations and partnerships. Lots of great stuff coming up, so please stay tuned for that interview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. Welcome to another segment here on TechStrong TV. Our guest for this segment is Janet Matsuda. Janet is the CMO over at Sysdig. Janet, welcome to TechStrong TV. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Alan, for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you on. Love the background there. It makes you feel like you're back in the office almost, huh?
Almost.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky, as we were talking off camera. I get to come to my office. It's the CEO's prerogative, I tell people. I sent everyone else home, and I come in here. But it gets me, at least I feel somewhat normal, and I get to talk to people. So
Always good.
Yep. So Janet, let's start with this. I think a lot of our audience is familiar with Sysdig, but maybe not everyone. This may be a case of first impression for them. So why don't we start there? Let's give them a little Sysdig background.
Sure. So Sysdig, fundamentally, we are addressing the security and visibility gap that a lot of people have when they move to a container and Kubernetes environment. It's very different. And so we have what we call a secure DevOps platform that allows you to embed security, compliance, and get visibility with monitoring in that container and Kubernetes place.
Yep. And so, the word observability has sort of glommed or like an amoeba swallowed monitoring. And that's what everyone seems to be focusing on today. Is that true at Sysdig too? Is observability become the focus of it, or is more?
Observability is important, absolutely, but we really have a much broader focus on visibility. And, we did start out with an observability solution. Sysdig Monitor was our first product. However, really, we're a security company now. And if you think about why do most people come to us, it's security first, and then they also adopt the monitoring solution for observability as well. It's great to have a single platform, especially in these times, have a single platform, single agent, and an ability to do both of those functions that are important to the cloud team, in one platform.
Absolutely. I've had several discussions over the last week or so. Going back last week, the folks at Sumo Logic went public, and I had one of their CTOs on, and we've had a partner from Lightspeed Ventures who used to work at Splunk and Elastic and stuff like that. And it's so funny, it's not funny, but I think there's a lesson here. So many startups and tech vendors who start with the broader function of monitoring and observability find themselves so pulled into security because there's such a strong use case here, right?
Yes.
For security, when you're observing, monitoring, whatever you want to call it, right? When you have access to that kind of data to use it to improve security, I think it's a case of, liquid finds its level. It's because security is just such the obvious benefactor and use case for that kind of technology. And so over and over again, we see this.
Yeah, I think there's a saying, you can't secure what you can't see. And so the first step to security is getting visibility. And then, you can put some controls in place.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk about another aspect, though, and that's Kubernetes, right? Sysdig has really kind of made a name for themselves as a security play within this cloud-native infrastructure, as we come to call it. And look, I know you guys did was it a recent survey or a polling where something like 70% of your customers, I believe, were on AWS, correct? And how many are on Kubernetes? Is it 100%?
Some of our customers, Kubernetes has won the war for orchestrators for sure, right? But there are customers that have been our customers for a long time, and maybe that's not where they started. So not everyone is on Kubernetes, but I think everybody that's really coming on board now if they're choosing an orchestrator now, they're really choosing Kubernetes. It's far and away the leading solution. And as you mentioned, we have this container usage report that we put out, and that has a bunch of statistics on that, so something people can access.
Let's talk a little bit about the report, if you don't mind. Any tidbits you want to share?
Okay, tidbits from the report. One of the things is that the average container lifespan is less than 5 minutes, right? They come and go so quickly. Now, there are a bunch of containers that last a long time, and there are a bunch of containers that don't last very long at all. So, what that says is when you look at security and how you're going to continue to secure a container and Kubernetes environment, you have to take a different approach. Containers are different, right? They're ephemeral, right? They come and go. They're dynamic the way they connect, to make up an application. They're different services that connect together. You can't see inside a container easily, right? And when people moved to microservices, they went from having, hundreds of applications, maybe, to having tens of thousands of services, and they have to figure out how to keep track of those. So those factors just create an entirely different environment to secure. And that's what we're seeing is people, they need to embed security into their DevOps workflow. We call that secure DevOps, right? So they need to, secure the build. A lot of people think about image scanning, and then they need to think about runtime security and how they're going to manage that, and monitoring, observability at runtime as well. And then what are you going to do if something does happen? You get an alert. You need to be able to have incident response and forensics that are effective. And that can be challenging. Most technologies were not set up for this container going away so rapidly. So being able to capture the record and being able to see what happened is a real challenge. And then the other challenge is compliance, right? These compliance guidelines weren't written with Kubernetes and containers in mind, right? And so being able to, have a mechanism where the rules that you use for checking configurations and checking for anomalous behavior are mapped to those compliance frameworks. That's a big challenge for people. So there's a lot of adjustments. And then container usage report really talks about, some of the things that we've seen in this environment. And, we, in the beginning of the year, we're going to have a new version of the container usage report coming out, but we just did a snapshot on what's going on in the security, kind of as a preview. And we found some really interesting things. Vulnerabilities, most tools, they scan for OS vulnerabilities, right? Because people think, well, those are the most important. But what we found is that non-OS vulnerabilities, over half of them, 53%, were high to critical severity. So people really need to scan for those. So that was kind of an insight of this new security snapshot as part of our report. The second thing is 58% of containers are configured to run as root. Kubernetes
Really?
was designed to be open, right? Easy for developers. So, you think about zero trust. Zero trust is like, don't allow anything and then start opening things up. Kubernetes kind of comes from the other extreme. Allow anything so it's easy for the developers, and then put the guidelines in place. And so as a result of that, developers are issuing these containers and they're 58% are configured to run as root. And that's something that, needs to be evaluated, right? They need to say, does this container really need root access? And so you need a check for that. And then you might want to give them a period of time to fix it. Maybe you let them go into production, but you say, okay, but we're going to check you again to see if you've fixed this issue, in a couple days. But that's
that's mind-boggling
big
to me. That is just, in today's age where zero trust has been such a hot topic for the last 2-3 years at least now, that 58%, over half of containers are running as root. I mean, that's got to be a ticking time bomb.
Well, absolutely, because if containers are secure, a lot of people feel that way because it's just the way they're designed. But if you think about it, if you do get a breach, then you have the container and the data might be running on the same host, right? And so it could be more dangerous. So the lesson is you need security in container and Kubernetes environments.
Sure.
And, a lot of times people have concerns that security is going to slow them down, right? They went to cloud and containers and microservices so that they could ship cloud apps faster, right? They want to improve their speed of innovation. Everybody kind of thinks about security as something that's a barrier to that, right? But if you are able to embed security into that DevOps workflow, using automation, making sure it plugs into the tools that the developers are using, you don't have to sacrifice speed of application delivery. And so that's their fear. And so we address that and make sure you could take this secure DevOps approach, but you've got to address security before you move apps to production.
Absolutely. Okay, so Janet, the next part of it then, well, first of all, I should mention that tomorrow we have our operationalizing cloud native with Kubernetes virtual summit, and Sysdig, of course, is a sponsor and is involved in that. I think you have a speaker there, or do you want to tell us about your involvement in that?
Yeah, so we have Pavan Shankar, who's responsible for our security product marketing, is going to be speaking there. And he's going to be talking about some exciting news that we actually have coming out today. And so we are making an announcement around some enhancements to the AWS environment. As you mentioned earlier, over 70% of our customers are using AWS. So it's a really critical environment for us. And we had a press release earlier this year about how we're working with AWS with our Falco open source project to secure Fargate with runtime detection. So there's we've been doing some work there, and this recent announcement highlights two things. One is the ability to look at CloudTrail logs and do threat detection on CloudTrail logs, and the other it's a tongue twister. And the other thing is the other piece is that we're announcing is having image scanning integrated in with Fargate and ECR. So for Fargate images, you're able to trigger that scanning in an automated way and in a secure way, so that you execute the scan without having to give your credentials or share your image with us, right? It just stays right in their registry. So those are two things that Pavan's going to be talking about in that breakout session.
Excellent, excellent. People, by the way, people can get to that off of the DevOps.com website. I believe it's operationalizing, or it's under Kube Virtual Summit is the domain name as well. You can still register for that. It's free. And it's not just the Sysdig, it's a full day of CNCF and just a whole bunch of great speakers, workshops, and expos. Janet, so we spoke a little bit about this upcoming announcement from, well, it's not upcoming, it was from this morning, right?
Right.
And spoke about the Kube Virtual. What else do we have to cover on Sysdig?
I think that, Sysdig is different than a lot of other security companies that are out there in a couple ways. One is we started with this idea, even before we were Kubernetes focused, that in order to have visibility, you needed to be able to go deep down to the Linux syscall level. So we talked about the fact that containers are black boxes, you can't see inside them. So therefore, if you want to see exactly what's going on, you have to go underneath to the Linux level. So that's something that's very different with Sysdig. And then we add context, because we talked about that you have tens of thousands of microservices. How are you going to figure out who owns fixing each issue, that you happen to find, whether you're doing incident response or scanning for vulnerabilities, or how do you even know which services are talking to other services, right? So that visibility into the containers and then the context around it is a real difference with Sysdig. Now we have a couple other differences. One is we're based on open source foundation. So Sysdig is an open source project that gives that visibility. We wrote Falco and contributed that to the CNCF. So that's the runtime detection for Kubernetes. And we also have full PromQL compatibility, and we work with Prometheus when you think about observability. So we're very much focused on doing things the Kubernetes way. And
not just Kubernetes, the whole cloud native way.
That's exactly right.
Right, because sometimes I think we focus on Kubernetes and we forget that there's this whole Falco being part of it. Right? There's this whole cloud native library ecosystem of applications. Some support Kubernetes directly, others you could use outside of Kubernetes, but they're all really important in today's new stack, if we could call it that. So
absolutely
good stuff. Just trying to pick up, Janet, we're about out of time. You know what I realized we did? For people who want to get like maybe a copy of the survey or the highlights, where can they get more information?
They can get more information by going to the SYSTIG website or by, through your event. We also have a booth there. So that's a great opportunity for people to come in. They can get a demo, they can talk to somebody, and get a lot of information there as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was an easy one. Yes, you can come to the Operationalizing Cloud Native with Kubernetes event. SYSTIG will have an exhibit booth there. It's open all day, and there's a ton of stuff you could download. You could chat with the SYSTIG folks there. As Janet said, you can get a demo, or if you can't, you can head over to the SYSTIG website, download it there, and contact them there. Janet, thanks so much for taking time out to be our guest today. Thank you for participating in the Cloud Native event we have tomorrow, and continued success over at SYSTIG.
Hey, Alan, thanks so much for having me on the show. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Janet Mitsuda, CMO at SYSTIG, here on TechStrong TV today. We'll be right back with another guest.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
Up next on TechStrong TV, we've got an interview between Alan and Theo Schlossnagel of Serconis. They're going to be talking about the problems associated with observability and manageability at scale. Lots of interesting things that they have to share, so let's give the interview a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel, and welcome to another section here on TechStrong TV. Our guest this session is Theo Schlossnagel. Theo is the CTO co-founder at Serconis. Theo, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Our pleasure to have you on, Theo. You know what? I know what Serconis is about, but I don't think everyone in our audience does. So let's talk a little bit about, well, you're the co-founder too. So give us the background on Serconis, how you came to co-found the company, maybe a little of your own background. People are always curious about that stuff.
Sure. So I'm a technologist and a serial entrepreneur. Founded 4 different companies. Serconis is the 4th. The first one was designed to kind of bring scalability consulting to the world, and we ended up servicing a little over 15% of the Alexa Top 100, so the biggest sites in the world. When we were doing that, we found that there were some things missing. We ended up founding companies around those missing things. Serconis is one of those, and I went on to run Serconis as a founder. Now I'm the CTO. But Serconis is there to tackle some of the challenges that we had in making sure that we understood the behavior of systems that we were operating. You got thousands and tens of thousands of systems across continents servicing users, and how do you know they're working? How do you know they're doing the right thing? So from the technical perspective, it's a data ingestion platform. So we take telemetry data from devices and applications, all the classic network switches and routers and things like that, but also up into the cloud, host agents, Kubernetes, all of that kind of stuff. And then we have an analytics platform that sits on top of that, tells people that things are good or bad, and lets people manage that.
Doesn't sound like it has to be too scalable, huh?
It's there's 2 challenges with monitoring. And the team here constantly curses me at times for that. The first one is that the rate of data growth in the industry is kind of awe. It's awe-inspiring. So since we started the company we've seen an increase of 1 times 10 to the 12th data volume. I mean, that is truly, I mean, that's an astronomical number, right? And then the other one, which is more painful, I would say, is that, you know, your monitoring system only needs to be more reliable than everything that it monitors.
Okay.
Which poses a serious problem.
Yeah. That's an you know, I've never heard anyone say that. I'm gonna steal that if it's okay. I'll try to credit you for it though. Your monitoring system just has to be more scalable than everything else that it monitors. I would say it has to be more scalable than the sum of everything else it monitors.
Right. I mean, if you have a monitoring system and it doesn't scale or it goes down and offline for any reason at all, then you don't have visibility into the systems you're trying to detect the same thing for. So it really has to be more reliable and more scalable than the union of all of its parts and all the things that it monitors. It's a real pain in the butt.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. If it was easy, everyone would do it, right? Isn't that they always tell you?
It's kind of funny. A lot of people try.
Yeah, no, and for good reason. So I wanted to mention you guys are doing a webinar. I believe it's up on, I don't know if it's a Container Journal or DevOps, but a MediaOps webinar with us on October 6th, is it? Yeah?
Yep.
And it's around monitoring in Kubernetes, correct?
Yes.
So I wanted to talk about that because, you know, look, I saw a recent survey, 70 or 75% of all the new apps being housed on AWS are Kubernetes based right now. That's phenomenal, right? 5 years, actually not even 5 years, I think 3 years since public release 1.0. 75% market share is just wow. But Kubernetes poses some special challenges, let's call them hurdles, for monitoring, right? It's different than a lot of the traditional monitoring that you've have seen as a problem for years and have been working on with Circonis. Let's jump into that a little bit. What's special about the Kubernetes use case?
I mean, I think in a lot of ways, it's the number of things that are special about it. So Kubernetes gives you a great promise that it gives you kind of a flat and, I mean, arguably convenient API for building deployable systems and services, right? So it's super appealing for people who want to build new tech and they say, like, where am I supposed to run this? If they figure out how to run it on Kubernetes, it gives them a tremendous number of options to deploy it locally in development and on-premises solutions in the cloud and different clouds. Not that it gives you miraculous cloud portability, but it does solve a really material problem with that portability of deployment. So that's great. The problem is that Kubernetes is undeniably complicated. And from an operator's perspective, you get to see all of that complexity and you actually have to cope with the fact that it's changing, quarter over quarter. Like Kubernetes last year doesn't look like Kubernetes this year from an operator's perspective. So I would say that one of the biggest challenges with Kubernetes in general, which leads into monitoring and many other things, is that keeping skills current and appropriate for being able to operate production systems with confidence on Kubernetes is a hard job. And part of operating systems like that is being able to monitor them, right? Understand when their behavior is unexpected, be able to address issues as they arise. And if the platform you're trying to operate keeps changing underneath you and is highly complex, not only do you have to learn that, you have to learn how to monitor it and how that monitoring has to change with every single release that comes out because it ends up having to change. So one of the huge challenges of monitoring is that it's hard enough to bite off the complexity of Kubernetes without also having to bite off the complexity of how to monitor Kubernetes. So it's one of the things we try to bring to the table is this kind of consistent turnkey approach to determining the health and the behavior of your Kubernetes infrastructure without trying to pull out the rug from under you, pull the rug out from under you every quarter with changes. So we want to give some element of consistency and stability and, as much as we can, simplicity so that you don't have one more complex thing that happens. And the second part of the challenge is there, why you can't just do that with old tech. Like you could say, I had this old op monitoring solution. I'm going to map it onto Kubernetes, keep that mapping up to date, solve that problem for my users. The problem is that the way the infrastructure changes in Kubernetes is kind of like the evolution of all of these different trends in computing all coming to a head. The ephemerality of it, right? So the idea of Kubernetes is that I want to deploy this service, but I don't really care where it runs. And if I have a node that fails, Kubernetes' job is to make sure it runs somewhere else. Right? When I deploy new software, it's going to spin up new containers for the new stuff and shut down the old stuff. Right? So you have this constant churn, not really knowing where, you're not supposed to care, but you also don't really need to know where your applications are actually running on which systems using what resources. And there's churn inside of that, and that, your web application or your API service, when it's running today, it may be running on a different set of infrastructure with different resources than it was yesterday, just by nature of it moving around in the cluster, or getting new versions. So there's this constant churn of the architecture, and there's a constant churn of the infrastructure. And at the same time, you still need long-term trending around that. It's still the same application and business value you're delivering. So the idea that you have all of this churn under the hood that you need to manage as an operator doesn't change the fact that you still need a consistent long-term view of the health of the application and services that you're running as a business, right? So trying to get both of those things right at the same time, on the same set of data is honestly just requires a new approach and new tooling. And that's what we have.
Absolutely. I saw a recent survey data. The lifespan of the average container, 5 minutes or less than 5 minutes. Now, there are some containers that, it's the same container at the application forever, right?
Right.
But those are doing very specific jobs usually. But the average container lifespan is 5 minutes. Because they're constantly churning out like that, as you mentioned. And so when you want some continuity in your monitoring, think about that's a huge challenge.
Very crazy.
Right. Really, it's the monitoring tool's job to make that not a challenge. Right. It needs to approach that problem as just a simple reality of the system, and then not care about that reality as much as delivering what the consumer of the monitoring really needs, which is consistent, coherent, continuous monitoring around the behavior of their systems. And I do wish those reports are a little fantastical. So we deal with data. That's what we do with all day long, right? So we've got trillions of data points a second at times coming in that. So trillions a second, that is a lot of data. So anytime someone says the average is something, I'm always thinking like, okay, what's the actual distribution of that data? And the real interesting part about containers, for example, is that the average may be a little under 5 minutes. But if you actually isolate those into groups, you're going to find usually 3 clusters of data. You've got like long-term production jobs where those containers last anywhere from 2 to 6 hours up to months, right? If you have low churn on that. So production systems tend to churn at a lower rate unless they're batch-oriented job systems. So not like user interactive jobs, but like batch data science jobs and stuff like that. Those tend to run a little bit faster. And then you have development, you've got CI/CD systems. A lot of times those containers only last for 30 seconds. You spin them up, you build your software, you publish your packages or what have you, and you shut them down. It's fast. Computers are fast. They don't have much to do. So I think that like looking at containers really doesn't do a good service to the community that's using containers because they aren't one. Right. So I wish that a lot of these reports that would come out with those would really do kind of a deeper data science job around classifying what those containers' purposes are. Because I think that people that are just adopting now are saying like, my containers are only going to run for 4 minutes. What am I going to do? And the truth is that if they're in production, that's highly unlikely. Like their containers are usually in the hours to weeks realm, depending on how they do things. So I think that those reports kind of mismanage new adopters' expectations of how their systems are going to work.
Absolutely. Again, I don't know how familiar our audience is with Serconis, but can you kind of maybe, Theo, without getting yourself or, protecting the innocent by changing the names or whatever, give us some examples of the kind of organizations in terms of breadth and scope that, are using Seconis to tackle this kind of thing, and what are they doing?
Yeah, so the typical organizations that we deal with are, there's a wide gamut. Some of the larger use cases end up being large B2C businesses where they have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of consumers against their service platform product. And they need to make sure that there is continuous high quality delivery of that platform. So good examples of that have been made public one way or another in the past. So Major League Baseball is a customer. HBO is a customer. Wow. So these platforms really all in. I mean, MLB is a great example of this. Is that they just have a really big complex system, right? If you think about Major League Baseball, right? They've got stadiums and players and statistics and sportscasting and radio, and I mean, they got everything, TV feeds coming out of stadiums. And then they have their entire online presence that provides, statistics for chyrons on TV and sports gambling and all sorts of stuff, right? So the complexity of the system, I think, truly represents a lot of the grotesque complexities that exist in like modern enterprise, where you've done a lot of acquisitions and you've got a lot of tech in a lot of places and there's not a lot of consistency. However, there's a tremendous amount of consistency in the desired value that the company's delivering. Like the company's got a mission and all that stuff goes into that mission, right? So from a behavioral monitoring perspective, like you care that all of those things, no matter where they are, how old they are, what they're doing, are delivering on that consistent vision and they're delivering to standard, right? And so what we really focus on is being largely data agnostic. We want to make sure that data, I don't care where it comes from. If it comes from the newest fantastic technology ever, like Kubernetes, or it comes from a switch from like 1985, switching packets for TV, right? Like it doesn't matter because that's what's driving your business. So we want to be able to get all of that data into the platform in a very quick real-time cadence. So second to second or sub-second to sub-second. And then be able to correlate behavioral patterns, right? So you can tell when something breaks. One, you can make a good estimate of how important it is that it just broke, and then be able to explore deeply to understand where and how it might have broke, so that you can perform efficient remediation, right? It's basically just to make sure people have a really good handhold on the operations of their systems.
Yeah. So, it's funny, Theo, I'll tell you, I remember going to the first DockerCon I attended, and I think it wasn't Seattle, it was Austin, was the first DockerCon I went to. Kubernetes wasn't in GA yet, it was a beta. But I remember sitting through demos of it, and then Docker back then too. And Docker, the container itself was kind of, I understood, what was going on there. I also understood that you were going to need kind of cluster management, orchestration, whatever you want to call it. My impression when I came home from Austin was, they got to make this easier. It's so hard. It's so goddamn complex.
How is that today?
But here we are, 3 years, 5 years, more than 5 years ago. It still is. And so I always thought that this would be a huge hindrance to adoption because you're going to need such a skilled labor set to manage this thing that you're just never going to be able to get enough people who are proficient to fill the need for this thing to scale out in usage. But yet here we are, right?
I think that's still a legitimate concern. I think that there are a variety of companies and projects, open source and commercial, that are really trying to take, some reasonable domain of Kubernetes, and if the nuance and details aren't critical to operating your business, providing a simple layer on top of that. That's what we're trying to do with the monitoring, right? Like if monitoring Kubernetes is the only thing you care about, you might have different opinions than us. But if running your apps on Kubernetes is what's important, then the details of the monitoring, you can forfeit your opinion on how it should be done, and then gain a tremendous amount of simplicity and avoid like all of the cognitive load of trying to figure out how you need to monitor, you could delegate that to us. And I think there's the same for job management. There's the same for storage. There's the same for resource optimization. All of these things, you really need projects and vendors out there to take big chunks of that ecosystem and provide a reduced complex layer of that, just so that people can consume. Because there is a skills gap, and I actually do think it's unfathomable that it's totally conquered.
Yeah, I've always thought this is why we have so many managed Kubernetes services, right?
100%.
Yeah, and I don't know if that actually goes away, but yet, the market, as I said, 75% of new apps Kubernetes based. So there you go. Theo, we're almost at the end of time. I wanted to couple of things for people who want more information about Serconis and all of the great things you're doing, with Kubernetes and without Kubernetes. Where can they go get information?
Well, like everyone else, www.serconis.com. we have it all there.
CIRCOU. No.
CIRCONUS.com.
Excellent. And for the information on this webinar, I think you can get it on DevOps.com or ContainerJournal.com under webinars, and we'll have it on there. That's October 6th, by the way. That's a live webinar, October 6th. It will be available on demand, so check that out. Theo, man, thank you for joining in with us today. It was a great conversation. We learned. It's interesting times indeed.
Excellent.
In the Kubernetes world. All right, man, good luck. Keep up the great work. Theo Schlossnagel, founder, CTO over at Serconis. We've got a webinar coming up with us on October 6th. Don't miss it. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest here on TechStrong TV.
Hey, welcome back to TechStrong TV. We've got lots more interviews coming up, including this one now between Alan and Jenkins co-creator Kosuke Kawaguchi, who is also formerly with CloudBees. He's got a new company now called Launchable, and he and Alan have a nice long chat about what Launchable's all about and what Kosuke's doing now. Kosuke is a really, really smart guy, and totally worth the time to listen to. So let's get right into that interview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. For this segment, I'm really thrilled to be joined by my friend KK, Kosuke Kawaguchi, for those who maybe are not familiar with KK. KK, hello and welcome.
Hi. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so you always have an open invitation to come and to chat with us, KK. I hope all is well with you and with everything that's been going on in California with the fires and, of course, with COVID. I'm glad to see you are well and doing good. KK, I think first of all, let's put it in perspective. KK, of course, is the founder of Jenkins. Was CTO, co-founder over at CloudBees, and it's got to be about a year ago now, or coming up on a year, launched your newest company called Launchable, of which you are co-CEO with your other co-founder here, Harpreet
Yeah.
Singh is also co-CEO along with you. And Harpreet, of course, also was with CloudBees, and
That's
then from
right.
there had gone to
Yeah.
Atlassian.
And also at Sun Microsystems, we've been together, so we've been
And
stuck
it's Sun. So yeah, you guys just met. Um, so, all right. So we've got the background. KK, they know Jenkins, they know Sun, they know CloudBees, they may not know Launchable. So why don't we start there? Why don't you give our audience a little kind of flavor, a little background on what Launchable is about?
Yeah. So, one of the things I've always been kind of curious about is how people actually develop software. Based on the experience with Jenkins, I knew that people do different things at different places, and there's an incredible amount of diversity in how the domain of the software we write and how they do it. So I was lucky enough before the whole the COVID thing happens. I was able to travel around the world for the conferences and stuff, and then I always make the point of meeting software development teams and asking them like how they do things, where they struggle, and so on. And like Alan, when you go to their offices and like as they open up to tell me things like they don't talk about in these conferences and events. So that got me sort of started thinking about the common challenges that these people are facing, somewhat unsexy problems, but nonetheless very real. And then one of those is the testing, the QA, or more broadly, the act of building confidence to the changes that they're making. So, and that's something I personally also had a lot of like frustration, pain around, because I've been working on this big system called Jenkins that's been around for 15 years at this point. So we amassed a large amount of tests. It's like 18,000 test cases that has to run. All of those has to run every single time we make even one line change, and that takes an hour. So that really feels like it's slowing people down. Like even the tiniest change is going to take like a 1 hour, 2 hour to get in. And then so here out in the world, other people are having the same problem, sometimes even worse. And then, so that's what we decided to tackle on the Launchable. Like we wanted to, a lot of people have too much tests, too many tests, but they are kind of like a watered down orange juice. Like there's so many of them, but collectively now, I don't think any of us are feeling like there's enough value in there. So if we could kind of squeeze those and concentrate them to what matters based on what you're changing. The idea is like you have a large system, you're changing just a tiny bit of it, then there's relevant set of the tests that matters to your change. So let's find those and run them. And then effectively, we can drastically reduce the time it takes for problems to be caught without really losing the quality. So that's the Launchable.
I got it. So living here in Florida, of course, I don't like watered down orange juice. We like our fresh squeezed orange juice here. But more importantly, KK, listening to you, I'm reminded of when last company before Media, two companies before Media Ops, a company I co-founded called Still Secure. We had three main products: intrusion prevention, vulnerability management, network access control. Two of those products, two of the three, and they were our biggest ones, that was exactly how we came upon them. Not reading Gartner reports or going to conferences, but really going to our customers and potential customers and understanding what their pain was, right? What were they grappling with? What kept them up at night when you spoke to, whether it's a CIO or a single contributor? What was the hard part of their job?
Right. Yeah.
And that's how we stumbled, and I literally mean we stumbled upon these things, because oftentimes we had other ideas of products that we thought the market needed, but in talking to real life people, you find out what they really need, right?
Right.
And that's how it gets well. Now, I also do agree with you. First of all, 15 years. Has it really been 15 years in Jenkins?
Yeah, it's from the very first line of code. Yes, it's no wonder you're getting older, Adam.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, KK, you must be getting old. Where have I been? But I don't know, man. 15. Wow. That's not Hudson. Jenkins, 15 years?
Well, so I'm counting with like what eventually became Jenkins, but
Okay.
it's a single code base in a single
Yeah.
product, really.
Wow.
Just a name change.
Unbelievable. I am getting old. Anyway, yeah, but I do think you're right. I think the world has grown so complex. You know, I had the interview I did before with getting on here with you was with the co-founder of a company called Circonis. And really, we spent the whole time talking about the complexity of Kubernetes deployments, right? There's so much complexity here at so many different levels that if you're going to, as you say, if you're going to run something that has to test the whole system before you're going to change one line of code or one container out of hundreds of containers, how can you possibly do it? I saw a recent survey where the average container's lifespan is like 5 minutes, right? There are some containers, you know, that's on average. Some containers last forever, but they're changed really quickly. If you're going to make those kinds of changes in systems, you can't afford to test the entire, you really got to get smart about it. And that is what Launchable is. I remember right from the get-go speaking to you and Harpreet about this.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are other places. So this testing, the good thing about this testing in general is like, despite the fact that the software development landscape is so diverse, testing is pervasive. And then this challenge shows up in different form. You talked a little bit about the web service context, the Kubernetes. Some of the people we often run into is people doing embedded software development. And those are, the hardware and software working together, and they're also getting incredibly complicated. Now, these guys, they need to test their software along with their hardware, both of which are under the development at the same time. So, it's really hard and expensive to acquire the hardware necessary to run the testing. So, making sure that they're getting the most out of this hardware, the precious few hardware, when developers ideally wants to test every commit every single time, that's a challenge. These tests also take a long time on these actual devices. So being able to again squeeze that orange juice a little is really helpful. So that's another kind that we.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, to a certain extent, you could set up emulators, right, for some of these hardware environments. But quite frankly, even with the best emulators, you still need, at some point, you probably got to test it on the hardware itself, and that always is a bottleneck, right? It's hard to scale out that kind of stuff.
Or here's another example where in a more, let's say, the financial industries and these other back-end system heavy places, they tend to have a long-running successful projects that's going to go on for a decade or even longer. And now what happens is these guys, people are turning over, and so the new guy comes in and they inherit all these massive test suites, which they have no idea what they are testing, but it's there. So they are afraid of removing it because it might be useful someday. So being able to kind of be a quantitative about these things, being able to point to people, hey, these are the useful tests. These are not actually not producing any useful signals. Test that never fail is like a guard dog that never works. Yeah. So it's not useful. And then you have to feed these dogs. So that costs, so being able to tell that, I think, is also have its own value. So that's just 2-3 different ways in which the same underlying problem manifests. And that's sort of what, to me, makes me feel like this is a worthy general problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the problem is, too, that human beings are creatures of habit. And why do we do anything? Well, that's the way we were taught, or that's the way we've always done it, or that's the way, the guy before me was doing it. And so oftentimes you'll get this sort of tribal knowledge, right? Where, why do we do it this way? Because that's the way we do it, right? But this test is useless. we must run this test. This is our procedure here. We run that test. And sometimes change can be hard. Change, not that it's going to affect the quality necessarily of the software, but just getting humans to change, the human element of it, right? Getting humans to change from their routine is a hard thing.
Right. And that is actually one of the points that led me to this new effort is, I think often in DevOps or in your developer productivity domain, we talk about the culture change and transformations and these organizational matters, which is on one hand, while it's sort of like a goes beyond the people who are suffering at the moment, because it's not like the developers in this company can instigate these changes. Like it's more long about like a long windy road outside their like a sphere of influence oftentimes. So I wanted to see like, can we give them more quick pill? Instead of telling them to go on like the diet change, like a food change that takes like a year to change the body. Like, can we give them some quick pill that addresses their pain today? Like, let's stop the bleeding. So one of the things I like about what we're doing is we are not really going to force any this like a massive organizational transformation to people. Like that effort can go on at their own slow, gradual pace. But this is a tactical help that addresses people's ongoing pain, like almost instantaneously without any complicated changes. Because you're already running a test, like just change a little bit, change the way you're running it, and that's it. So,
agreed.
Yeah.
Excellent. So KK, back in the startup saddle here, Launchable is just past a year since founding. How's it been going back and starting over, literally from scratch with a company?
Right. Yeah. So this it's been great. Every different aspect, like a journey, every different life phase of a company is interesting in its own right, but there's something uniquely special about this like early day infant companies. I think for the same reason, the infants are adorable. So, I learned a lot from the Klavi's experience, and so is Harpreet, my co-founder, and so we are putting a lot of those into practice. And then, it's easier to shape the newborn than like a shape a grown-up. So, I feel...
Well, you start with a clean slate,
yeah,
right, and without bad habits. But
so
I'll tell you, if I may, so I've co-founded about 5-6 different companies over my career. Most venture, except for Media Ops. Media Ops was not venture backed. To me, it's almost like you can't step into the same stream twice, right? Even though you learn and you take, what you learned from each previous company. My grandmother, God bless her soul, used to tell me every child, every grandchild was unique. She never loved one more than the other. She loved them all equally because they were all unique in their own special way. It's the same thing with companies that you start. You love them all because, to start a company is you need to be invested in it. And I don't mean financially, just, I mean you need to be invested in it. But each one is also unique, and lessons that you learned you can apply, but somehow or another they manifest themselves differently.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I wanted to bring up this just like kids are different,
Every kid is different, so is every company.
So one of the things that this kid is a little different is, another passion is related to another passion of mine, which is, I come from Japan originally, right? So I'm well connected in that tech scene there, and I know there are a lot of capable software engineers, but all in all, that network of engineers and like a tech sectors is not at all connected with that of the US, European software development ecosystem. So, and that's like a somewhat, I feel like that's something I feel passionate about bridging, and I'm in a little bit of a unique position to be able to see that there's a potential in ways that other people can't. So,
it's interesting you bring it up. So here at DevOps.com, right, I dig into our metrics, our viewers, our visitors, because it's really important to me. And we really serve a global audience. About 37% are the US, about 32% are Europe. Anywhere on any month, 15 to 17% are from India. 2 to 3% will be Australia. And the rest of the countries of the world are always represented, right? Japan is always around 1% at most, right? So there are some people in Japan who read this or visit DevOps.com. But given the size of its economy, its population, its influence, it's not. You would think it should be as big as Australia, certainly.
Right.
But it's not, and it's because they always tell you, well, if you're going to be in Japan, you got to be localized.
Yeah.
You got to put it in Japanese, and you've got to be localized.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what holds it back from integration with everyone, with the rest of the world, because what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, the language is indeed a part of it. For better or worse, Japan has been the number 2 economy in the world for a long time before China took it over. So there was a sizable enough domestic market in which enough companies could just serve that and survive. So now I think the writing in the wall that is not the case. And so I think in my mind, that means it needs to be integrated into the rest of the software industry, the rest of the world. And I think that change is happening, but somewhat slowly.
It will. I mean, Japan was not a company that didn't know how to export, right? Japan's pretty good at exporting. So I don't know if I'd agree that, they were just focused on their own internal market. And then you think about it too. Companies like a Sony or a Panasonic, or some of the electronics technology companies, they're worldwide players, right? And so software is a vital piece of what they do of their product line.
It's becoming more and more so, yeah.
I would see that in there, but you're right. Hey, KK, I wanted to bring up, we were talking off camera, I saw that shot up on the wall there, and I thought you were going to tell me it was the Challenger crew, or maybe a picture you bought at the Kennedy Space Center. We were talking, we both go there. But no, that's the Launchable crew, huh?
Yeah, so we ever since this company started, we were never able to meet together all in one place because the first face-to-face we were planning, we had to cancel because of the COVID in the last minute. So we thought, on celebrating 1 year anniversary, we thought, well, if we can't meet in physical space, let's see if we can at least commission a picture in which we are all in one place. And with a name like Launchable, we got this a space astronaut theme going on. So that's why,
That's very, very cool. Actually, I have to tell you, you're keynoting a DevOps Experience, our virtual event at the end of October. It's our 3rd annual one. We're going to do another interview about that keynote, but it just so happens that our theme for the DevOps Experience is a space theme as well. And I shot a little promo in my own astronaut outfit, and we had an orange astronaut like that kind of floating in our studio here with a space background, playing space music. It was coincidentally, we're also into the space theme right now. Maybe it's something to do with COVID. Anyway, KK, where can people find out? Where is Launchable now? Is general release? Can people download and use it? Is it still in beta? What's the situation?
Great. So so what we are currently working on is work with some enterprise teams who are having these problems that I just described, like long test feedback delay and so on, and making sure that what we are building actually does work in these places and have the right impact. Because you and your audience knows this complexity of the enterprise software development. It's never be like simple and trivial. So there's always this interesting gotcha and details that sort of helps us educate how we need to approach these problems. The other thing we are spending a lot of effort on is how to show the impact. Actually, let me come back to that point. So that's the phase we are in. And then if some of you who's hearing this feel like this is the kind of problem you're having, then this is a great opportunity to influence this early product development phase. And then we are hoping to go to general availability soon, but we are not at the point where we can communicate the date yet, but should be in the order of months, is certainly not years, because, startup.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we know how that goes. KK, for enterprises who are out here who say, hey, this is a problem we have, we'd like to get in early, we'd like to tell you about the issues we're having. Is there a way for them to reach out to you on that?
Yeah, so Launchable Inc., like inc.com, that's our website, and or like I think the Kosuke would probably, searching Kosuke would probably find me, and so we can take it from there. So we'd love
Kosuke always works. So if you're an enterprise out here who, what KK is talking about is resonating with you, head over to launchableinc.com, and you can reach out or reach out to KK directly under Kosuke, and no guarantees, but maybe they'll be able to take you, put you into their beta, alpha, or test, development program as we move closer to general release here. KK, you're going to come back on soon. We're going to talk about DevOps experience.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And as I said in the beginning of the show, you always have an open invitation to come tell us about what's going on at Launchable. You can bring Harpreet along next time too.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure. Anytime you want. All right, man. Hey, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're well. Stay well. And I'll be in touch with you soon.
Likewise.
Thank you. All right. Kosuke Kawaguchi, KK, co-CEO at Launchable. Launchableinc.com is the website. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with another guest on TechStrong TV.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to another edition of TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with today's headlines. On DevOps.com, we have a really interesting take on low-code. This is something that we've been writing a lot about lately, but this one actually looks at 5 use cases that low-code has solved in 2020. In light of the pandemic and considering what a year this has been so far, this article shows how organizations have actually used low-code to create solutions to the issues that have cropped up as a result of the pandemic. So everything from COVID-19 testing to remote learning to meal delivery, it's all covered. Definitely worth checking out. And speaking of COVID-19, we also have an article that talks about how the pandemic has changed the mindset of many IT organizations and how that's going to carry over into a post-pandemic world. Obviously expectations are going to be set higher, so organizations need to work now to shift their IT departments beyond that crisis mode that they're in now and to a new way of working that is even more agile than before. So get ready, because the rockets are about to lift off. Over on Container Journal, Mike Vizard has an article about Red Hat and Samsung. The two companies are collaborating to build 5G networking platforms that are based on the Red Hat OpenShift platform. So just another example of how Kubernetes and containers are helping advance 5G technology. Over on Security Boulevard, we have got Sue Peremba, who has written an article on the results of a survey that was done by New Data Security. It shows that in light of the changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, cyber criminals are increasingly turning to what they call human-like cyber attacks as a more sophisticated way to commit fraud. Human-like attacks are those that kind of emulate human behavior during a web transaction, but they actually originate from a computer program or a script. And they're designed to evade traditional technologies that spot attacks by bots or scripts. Also on Security Boulevard, we have a post on what organizations can do to ensure they are compliant with CCPA, or the California Consumer Privacy Act, which went into effect January 1st, but I believe that the honeymoon is almost over. James Quick, who is the author, he talks about how he calls this period that quiet before the storm, if you will, when organizations will actually see whether they are prepared to abide by the regulations of the Act, which has huge implications for companies that collect data on California residents, and that's regardless of whether the companies are in California or in another state or in another country altogether. All right, that's all that we have for the headlines today on the sites. Please check the sites, and we have news stories going up all the time. So please visit DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal. And I will see you later on this week with more news headlines.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Ryan Corey, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Cybrary. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you as well, Charlene. Happy to be here.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad you're here. Tell me a little bit about Cybrary.
Cybrary is the world's largest career development platform for cybersecurity. So what we do is we're really working towards trying to close the skills gap as much as possible. We want to see more people enter into the cybersecurity field. And we also want to see professionals that are in the field continually upgrading their skill sets as the years go on. We kind of started this with the concept of, the old way of doing things was to basically send somebody to a 1-week training course. And then that's their training for the year because the entire budget was spent. Whereas cybersecurity is the fastest moving landscape in the world right now. And if you're not continually learning about the things that are evolving as quickly as they are, then you're going to fall behind the curve. And so that's the problem that we really set out to solve.
Excellent. Excellent. So along those lines, you guys recently put out a report. So tell me a little bit about the skills gap research report that you put together.
Yeah, sure. So Cybrary has about 3 million users. We grow by about 2,000 new users every single day. So we have a really good reach into kind of the IT and cybersecurity community, right? And Cybrary is also a community amongst itself. So we had the opportunity to run some really interesting research. And we had been hearing over the past, call it year and a half, a problem that was emerging amongst CISOs. We can sit down with the CISO and we continually hear the same thing. The CISOs are having this problem where security is treated as an afterthought, and it puts a massive amount of stress onto the security organization when a product, service, or application gets sent to them last minute, kind of usually pre-launch, just ready to launch. Here's our launch date. Okay, and you're giving me 3 days to security assess this thing. And so it's driving the security leadership just crazy. So what we started to see emerge was security and technology leaders in enterprises thinking about how they want to put security skill sets into the hands of everybody in their organization. So in other words, if you're a systems administrator, network administrator, your DevOps, whatever, we want to put security skill sets into those people's hands so that security is baked in along the way. Because we've always said security is everybody's job, but we never actually took it seriously. We still always just shoved it on the security team. So the survey we ran to about 1,000 people, and we had some really interesting statistics come out of it. And basically what the survey said was there are certainly skills gaps in organizations, and those skills gaps are causing problems, fear, doubt about the security capabilities of the organization. And so in the survey, you'll find that the majority of companies aren't on the job training or actively training their staff because it's always been so hard to do, right? And then it's causing a lot of downstream effect and lack of confidence in how people do their jobs. And we don't, as enterprises, we've always been pretty fearful of, or we've always had that challenge of how do you train these folks? Right. How do you get them skilled up? But years and years ago, the organization NIST created the NICE cybersecurity framework. And that cybersecurity framework, that NICE framework, actually does a phenomenal job of telling us what skill sets belong in the hands of different people across the entire IT org, not just security, right? So like if you are a systems administrator, you should have these additional skill sets so that you're working in a secure manner in your job. And so that's what we found. We found that the problem continues to manifest itself even worse continually over time here.
So you mentioned the idea of kind of shifting security onto everybody within an organization, that responsibility, and certainly in the world of DevOps, that's a mantra that's been gaining steam over the last couple, I would say 18 months or 2 years. The concept of DevSecOps in shifting security to left in the development pipeline, and it seems like organizations slowly but surely are adopting DevSecOps processes. But what are some of the other ways that organizations can kind of ingrain security in their entire workforce?
Sure. Well, the one thing that I've seen that we know for sure is that the broader kind of economy has adopted end user security awareness training pretty well. Mm-hmm. So like even us, we're a small shop at 80 people, and we've had end user security awareness training since almost day one. And so organizations have done a great job of adopting end user security awareness because you need to enable like even the marketing team, the sales team, and so on to not click on phishing emails and do that kind of thing. So I think we've done a really good job there. But with the absence of training security skill sets into the rest of the technology stack, the people that work on the tech, services, applications, products, whatever, that's where the void is right now. And it's become a challenge to understand who knows what. Like you can't take inventory of skill, or I'm sorry, in a previous world, you couldn't take inventory of your skill sets on your team. So you have no way of knowing if the systems administrators or the DevOps professionals have security skills, but that's changed. The world of online has enabled us to put people into actual environments, have them do their job on a keyboard, assess their skills in how they've done at the task that they were asked to do, and then give the manager a report showing across their entire org, maybe by team, we can do, or you can look at also granularly at the individual, and you can actually see the void. So it's not as big and daunting as it once was. Now you think about that, you take a look at, Jenny in DevOps. Jenny in DevOps is good at the majority of the core things of her job, and her manager, her boss thinks that of her. But Jenny at DevOps doesn't understand penetration testing. And so doesn't understand how a hacker will think about, her job. And so you can see that now with the current technologies like Cybersecurity, of course. You can see who does and doesn't have what skills. And then just, learning has obviously evolved a lot over the years, and the new trend is really kind of micro learning. So if Jenny just needs to understand penetration testing, that's simple enough to just assign that to Jenny and then have her get those skill sets and become just way better in her job. So that's how you do it in a modern world. It wasn't available years ago, but it is something that we can do now.
Okay. All right. Great. So what about cybersecurity professionals in general? Do you think that they're keeping up with the security trends that are happening out there, especially in light of the ongoing pandemic and all of the threats that have kind of cropped up around it between bad domains and malware and phishing attempts and just everything. Every time we turn around, we hear about some other security threat that's related to the pandemic. So do you think security teams are keeping up?
So we actually faced a really huge surge in individuals buying Cybrary during the pandemic. So it almost went to, it almost doubled in the time frame of the key shutdown months. Our usage almost doubled, which was good for business, of course. But yeah, so of the respondents, about 1/3 work in an actual cyber role, not just broader IT, of the respondents of this survey, and their confidence levels were equally as low as people in the IT side. So they don't appreciate that their organizations aren't taking training as seriously as they would like, and it's causing them to have a lack of confidence in even their own roles, because the industry does move so lightning fast that keeping up is just inherently hard to do. And if an organization isn't putting money to work against that problem, then it's just going to continue to cause lack of confidence, and we're going to see breaches and so on. So yeah, I think the individuals want to. They said that in the survey. Like they want to, they prefer online. It was like 62% prefer online versus other methods of learning. So it's just a matter, I think, of getting the message out and getting the organizations there.
I think time is a big factor as well. You know, I can certainly see that big surge happening right at the start of the pandemic, because everybody got sent home and people like, well, now what do I do? You know, I can do my job, but you know, it's all of a sudden it's been turned upside down. And you know, if you're like me, you kind of like to have things on schedules. When your schedule gets disrupted, you kind of get a little loopy and you don't know what's going on. So, you know, I imagine there were a lot of folks who were just trying to find ways to, you know, fill the hours in the day. And I think online learning in general actually experienced a surge. But it's great to hear that, you know, folks are learning in the right areas, so to speak, when it comes to cybersecurity. So what are some of the trends that based on the report that you guys expect happening in the next year or so?
I actually expect, just based on what we found and the desire, and the fact that the desire is there, I expect tailwinds. I mean, you kind of just mentioned it, you know, just a minute ago. You know, people are looking for new methods to learn, and online learning, I believe, in general, is going to lift over the coming months. We're starting to see, you know, like I said, that usage doubled in that window. So I think tailwinds are coming. I think that the world will be taking this more seriously. I do know from talking to customers as often as I do that a lot of people out there are panicking about cloud right now and how to secure the cloud and all that kind of stuff. Because like it's, oh my gosh, all of a sudden everybody's at home and everything's got to be cloud. Right. And so if the rest of our organization hasn't caught up to that, so they're panicking about that right now. And then I think that they'll realize that they've got a lot more security vulnerabilities than they had before, and that should probably push the security training industry forward. That would be my best guess based on the data.
Okay. All right. Great. What about types of people who are looking for the cybersecurity training now? Are there certain departments or certain job responsibilities or job titles that you've noticed an increase looking into cybersecurity training?
The SOC, people preparing for the SOC is on fire right now.
Okay.
So it's our #1 career path. And so, you know, we have a lot of career paths on Cybrary. And ranging from cybersecurity engineer, penetration tester, network engineer, systems administrator, that kind of thing. The SOC is just going wild right now. And so what we're seeing a lot of people want to enter into SOC jobs out of other IT roles. So they see that as their path to entry in cybersecurity. But then also the SOC level 2 and SOC level 3 career paths are equally as in demand right now for us. And so, so you're seeing a lot of people that are kind of lower in their career, already in a SOC, pushing hard now to get to that next level for a little higher paycheck.
Okay. All right. Great. So is this the first year of this skills gap report?
It is. Yes.
Okay. All right. You're going to make it an annual thing?
We probably will. It was pretty easy to execute on. It just took a little writing. It was easy to get the data, and then you just have to put the data together.
I hear you. All right. Well, then I'll meet you here this time next year. We'll talk about next year's results.
I'm looking forward to it. Counting down the days already.
All right. Great. Ryan, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well, Charlene. Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am here now with the Tuesday edition of the webinars previews. As always, we have some great webinars coming up on the sites, so thought I'd let you know about some of the ones that are coming up in the next few days. The first one is called From Docker Straight to AWS. It's happening Wednesday. That's tomorrow, September 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's on DevOps.com. And this one is sponsored by Docker and AWS. The webinar is a hands-on presentation that looks at how developers can use Docker Compose and Docker Desktop to deploy applications on Amazon ECS and AWS Fargate. That streamlines the process of deploying and managing containers in AWS from a local development environment running Docker. Now, this is something that as more organizations are adopting container technology, they want to find ways of doing it more easily and in a way that is not going to ruin their day, so to speak. So definitely check out this webinar. Lots of good stuff that's happening in it. The next webinar is called Operators and Observability for a Smarter Kubernetes Platform. That's easy for me to say. That's Friday, October 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace and Dynatrace. This webinar looks at the growing complexity in applications and underlying infrastructure, as everybody knows in IT environments. We know that Linux and open source development tools are becoming the norm, if they're not already in a lot of environments, and the ways that a lot of organizations are using Kubernetes for running and managing containerized workloads in distributed environments. Red Hat and Dynatrace are teaming up in this webinar to show how they can be the foundation of what they call a trusted, smarter enterprise Kubernetes platform. So again, containers, Kubernetes, that's the topic of the day for a lot of folks. And so another one definitely worth checking out. If you're interested in OpenShift, you're interested in what Dynatrace has to offer, check out this webinar. The third webinar I want to let you know about is happening October 6th. It's next week at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. It's called Achieving the Ultimate Performance with KVM. This one is sponsored by Storepool, and it looks at the ways organizations can get the most out of their KVM cloud and how to optimize it for performance. So they're going to look at questions such as why performance matters and how to measure it properly. What are the main components of an efficient new age cloud? How to select the right hardware, how to optimize CPU and memory for ultimate performance, which network components work the best, and how to tune the storage layer for performance. Lots of good stuff in this webinar, chock full of information. And again, this one is happening October 6th at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. That's 11 a.m. Eastern. Check the sites for upcoming webinars that we have. We have a lot of them, folks, and we also have a lot of them on demand too. So please check out the sites to take a look at both the webinar sections and upcoming and on demand. And hopefully you will find some webinars there that pique your interest. All right, that's all I have for this week's edition or the Tuesday edition, I should say. Trying to end the week easily or early. I'm going to start that over. Okay, final outro. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's all that we have for today's edition of the webinars previews. Please check back on Friday this week for another edition of the webinars preview for webinars that we have upcoming. And also check the sites for the webinars that we have upcoming, a bigger list of webinars that we have upcoming. And take a check at some of the webinars that we have on demand as well. We have a ton of them. Until then, please stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.
Control to Major Tom. Turn up your CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom.
10, 9, ignition sequence.
Countdown engines on. 6, 5, check ignition and may God's love be with you.
This is Major Tom to Ground Control. DevOps Command is here to stay. I have a great way for you to engage today. DevOps looks very different, but not to worry. We have KK to show you the way, and Batya Galoob has something to say. And more. DevOps Experience 3 is coming your way October 22nd. And as it has been since the first, it's virtual. We know everything's virtual today, but this one is designed virtual from the start, and it's free as it should be. We have great speakers beyond KK and Batya Galoob, along with lots of learning and interactive chat, expo halls. We're going to be covering CI, CD, observability, GitOps, SRE, tools, the humans of DevOps, and some surprises too. Sign up today at DevOpsExperience.com. DevOps Experience is going to go where no DevOps conference has ever gone before, and the force will be with you. So can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? See you at DevOps Experience, October 22nd, DevOpsExperience.com.
All right, up next on TechStrong TV, we have Mike Vizard having a conversation with Miska Kapainen from Mirantis. They're going to have a conversation about the rise of managed Kubernetes services across hybrid clouds. It's something Mirantis has been noticing happening a lot more in the cloud space. And as Kubernetes becomes more prevalent, managed Kubernetes services in tandem are becoming more prevalent. So Miska and Mike are going to talk about that and kind of what the landscape is shaping up to be. So a really, really interesting conversation. So have a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks. We're here today with Miska Kapainen. I may or may not have gotten that right, but I think it's close. Who's the Senior Director of Engineering for Mirantis. Miska, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you and I got started talking about this idea that there might be a new type of developer emerging in the era of Kubernetes. And I don't think a lot of people have seen that or maybe even understand the conversation. So why don't you walk us through a little bit about what you're seeing and what's changing?
Well, I think how I see this new breed of developers, basically, I can see them being almost like a products of the DevOps movement, empowering of individual and independent development teams. They are the ones who leverage the 12-factor model, and they are the masters of infrastructure as a code principles. And I feel that these are the people who they have learned all these technologies and skills and basically became almost like self-sustained superheroes in a way. And if you look at now on Twitter and maybe on Hacker News and some other kind of popular forums, so those are the messengers and evangelists of Kubernetes, GitOps and maybe cloud native software development in general. And with their help, organizations adopt the new culture for innovation and break down the silos and radically improve the velocity in the software development and speed of business in general. And I think that those superheroes, they are very infectious. They infect people around them. They are like viruses in a way that they can get people excited and pulled in. And I feel that if we go ahead in time for a couple of more years, it's actually going to be more and more these type of superheroes around. Yeah, I think that's the kind of how we kind of have been generating these new type of developers, and the way how they work might be a little bit different than, let's say, some traditional developers.
We have been talking about these so-called developers, sometimes known as full stack engineers and other folks, but when you go talk to IT operations people, they will say, hey, the more time that these superheroes are spending on managing infrastructure, the less time they're writing code and doing the things that have value to the business. And while there may be a need to make things go better and faster on the ops side than they have historically, they would say eventually it's going to come back the other way, where there'll be enough automation for them and tools and GUIs that there won't be the need for developers to manage the full stack and all the infrastructure, because a lot more of that will be automated at scale by somebody sitting in the ops department. So my question to you is this a moment in time, and does this pendulum kind of swing back and forth, or do you think this is a permanent change, and if so, why?
I think because the missing link basically is that before Kubernetes, so it has been still kind of very mixed salad of solutions out there. And of course, if you combine all of them together, so you can get very good results. But I think Kubernetes is the technology that truly kind of brings all these ideas together and kind of almost like standardize the way how these different systems should be interacted with. And I think that's really powerful. I feel that Kubernetes is in fact the operating system for cloud in the future, if not already. And I think we need to think about it maybe that if you look at the new breed of developers, how they operate, is that they see that there are no silos. Of course, this is nothing new. So devs are the ops and ops are the devs and the other way around. And there is no predefined, let's say, written in stone technology stacks. They are always scouring GitHub for the latest and most modern stacks for their purpose. And they will see all the dependencies as an API calls. Basically, anything is available just in a matter of seconds by doing an API call. So let's say you will need a clustered database, you will need a poop soup system, you will need a machine learning platform, you will need serverless, whatever you need. All of these technologies are basically available to you just in a click. And they also see infrastructure as a code, of course. So everything must be able to automate. They don't have to order new machines from anywhere. They can create those machines by themselves. And usually also these people, they have very strong sense of ownership on the products and the services that they are building. So I think that's the kind of very powerful what this new breed of developers, how they are approaching things.
Who's going to run the Kubernetes cluster? Because at least what I've seen so far is early adopters are still pretty much self-hosting, and then the newbies come along and they'll self-host because they're just getting started. But everybody else seems to be leaning in towards more of a managed service that they get from either AWS in the cloud or Microsoft or Google, or they lean in on some sort of cross-platform service, which is where you guys increasingly are going. So who's actually managing the clusters, and then what is the end customer going to do? What's the handoff and the interface between somebody who's a managed service provider and somebody who's working on an internal IT team?
Yeah, I think most of the people would enjoy, even this new breed of developers, they would enjoy living in a world where basically the only API they would have to care about is actually Kubernetes. Or I can also argue that maybe AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, they are also almost like a kind of cloud operating systems themselves. So they are their own kind of universes. You have to learn their tool chains and how to work with them, just like with Kubernetes. But the difference to Kubernetes is, of course, that it doesn't care what is the underlying infrastructure. So it can benefit all of these environments. So in the end, I believe that for bigger enterprises, it's going to be these ops teams who create and operate these clusters. And there are hundreds and thousands of developers who access these clusters for their benefit. And the beauty of that is the simple. So let's say that in the old world, when you wanted to create an application and you needed to have something simple as a database. So if you don't have a system like Kubernetes, so usually often what happens is that you will send an IT request to your ops team and request a database from the ops guys. And then they will go and they will deliver you this database, and then you can start using it. Maybe a more advanced use case is that you have been given AWS credentials. So then you can go to your AWS account and you can spin up a couple of machines and install this database on your own, or you can use one of the managed database services from there. But there is quite a bit of manual labor involved. And if you decide to go with the AWS managed databases, which are good, but they also increase your they lock you into that particular platform. So if you're working with Kubernetes, if you need a clustered database, you will just do a couple of API requests and you have your database up and running in your cluster. So I think that will just, provide the freedom for individual developers. They don't get stuck ever when they have all these kind of tools available for them.
Do you think customers are worried about getting locked into a particular platform, or in their minds, is Kubernetes kind of the brand new layer and everything is magically going to be portable as a result?
Well, of course, it's beautiful, as an idea. I think everybody can agree about that. I think it's a great if you are working in an enterprise where actually you can be brave enough and make a decision that we are now going to be 100%. We are going to be all in AWS. And technologies that are not available from AWS managed services, they don't exist. It will simplify actually your life quite a bit, because then you have a kind of defined set of components you can use and technologies that you can use. And of course, this portfolio is growing all the time. So if you can make that decision, so that's a good decision, I hope. It's almost impossible to transform and migrate away from there. But sometimes that's not even, that's maybe not so important.
It seems like most organizations though are using multiple clouds, and they're a little concerned sometimes that Amazon might turn around and buy somebody they compete with. And so they're trying to think about some longer term strategy, or does convenience trump everything? And that's pretty much what we're going to do until it's too late, and we'll figure it out later when it's maybe somebody else's job.
Yep, agreed.
How much of Kubernetes are we going to see out at the edge? And is that a different kind of use case and a different kind of management challenge versus running Kubernetes in the cloud? Because I know everybody's moving towards the cloud, but the fact of the matter is we're going to need workloads out at the edge, and it's going to be a little more of these real-time kind of applications where I need to collect and process data right then and there. So what are the challenges around Kubernetes at the edge?
Well, first of all, trying to understand what is the problem you are actually really trying to solve. I think that's the fundamental question around edge in many cases. Anyway, for me personally, I'm an edge user. I have personal edge, so I have a Raspberry Pi box on my table that runs my local Kubernetes development environment for me, because I can't stand the fact if my local laptop is humming like crazy, and it's going to be red hot because of the local development cluster I'm running. So I have in a way, I have mini cloud on my desk. So it's also that what is in the end, what is edge, how far we want to take the edge and the idea. For sure, I have seen use cases related to automotive industry, for example, where the 5G and edge is going to be crucially important. But I think many people are still kind of trying to find out the real use cases for edge.
It may wind up there are layers of edge. I may have a complete hyper-converged platform sitting in a carrier's network somewhere at the very edge, and they're going to call that the edge, but then hanging off that might be sub-edges made of Kubernetes that are then talking to endpoints. So it seems to me that there's going to be a lot of layers and nuances of what the definition of the edge is, because once you get to the edge, you may determine that there are many more edges to come. Do you think that those edges are going to be running on virtual machines, or will they be running bare metal, and when will we run bare metal versus VMs? What's your take?
For edge machines particularly, I think this bare metal is a very good choice, because you don't want to waste any capacity on basically any padding. So you want to extract all the power you have on those machines to be easily available and kind of fully available for your actual applications running on top. However, it doesn't take away the need to somehow manage the fleet of infrastructure. And for that purpose, VMs has been a good technology, how to actually manage the kind of the infrastructure part. So you will end up using virtualization in there or something else, but something you will definitely need to manage your infrastructure.
So it's going to be a hybrid world. I know people talk about hybrid cloud like it's basically on-premise to a public cloud, but the more I listen to folks, the more I'm starting to think that hybrid is serverless plus VMs plus bare metal plus a hodgepodge of all this other stuff. Are we getting to the point where IT is just too complex for people to cope with? And we promise people simplicity, but I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
Yeah, I think, and also the fact that we are now at the moment, we are coming up with new kind of ways of new technologies are emerging all the time, and how they all kind of relate to each other. It's quite challenging unless you have been into this deeply into this business for quite some time. So for some new people, it might be quite confusing. I fully agree. However, I think that again, and I strongly believe in this way, that Kubernetes is it's the glue that kind of brings all of these things together. Because if you think about it, I think, at least personally, I don't know if there is a serverless platform that actually would run without Kubernetes underneath. So serverless runs on Kubernetes, machine learning runs on Kubernetes. And actually now, if you look at the 5G operator networks and the open platforms that they are creating on that side, they are also based on Kubernetes. And in there, if they have some specific needs to run actually some virtual machine workloads, so they are also orchestrating that through the Kubernetes. So it's the glue that kind of brings all these technologies together. And in that way, it's quite beautiful.
Do you think that people will see Kubernetes at the end of the day? Because when you talk to the folks who build it, they always remind you that Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. So I'm going to have abstractions on abstractions. So as we go and think about how Kubernetes will be adopted in mainstream environments, is it going to show up underneath something else and we're never really going to see Kubernetes other than the fact that there's an API somewhere out there that somebody may occasionally catch a glimpse of?
No, I said, well, Kubernetes is an operating system in the end. So there is always Kubernetes by itself. It means nothing. Nobody wants to use Kubernetes just for the sake of using Kubernetes. So usually you have some other need why you are using Kubernetes. So let's say that I'm interested in machine learning. So I need to have a system where I can deploy my machine learning system. And Kubernetes happens to be the easiest way for me actually to deploy this machine learning system. And same goes with the serverless. So as a consumer or end user to serverless product, I don't necessarily even see the Kubernetes that is under the hood and running the serverless platform, but it is there. And it's basically depending a little bit on the abstraction level where you are operating in. If you are a technology vendor and you are creating a technology product, so most likely you will deal with the Kubernetes directly. If you are just application developer, so maybe you are not interacting with Kubernetes directly, but through some application running on top.
Okay. I'm not sure you're advising people to do this, but I suppose you could create your own little Kubernetes cluster at home for your own personal use the way you have. But what is your best advice to people in terms of where they should get started with Kubernetes and what they should be thinking about? Short, of course, of going on the Mirantis website, but what do you think people should do to kind of start down this path? It feels like a lot of people have put up one cluster, but how do you operationalize this stuff?
Yeah, I think the best way basically to poke around and take a look and trying to learn what this Kubernetes is all about is basically get yourself a cluster from wherever. It can be from AWS or it can be from basically anywhere. What is the easiest way for you to get the cluster? So it can be also running locally on your local machine, something like Kubernetes on Docker or Minikube or something like that. So once you have your cluster up and running, I highly encourage to use a tool like we have been making available, the Lens, that is visualizing this whole cluster in a way that kind of makes sense. And it's once you have the Lens connected to your cluster, it's very easy to start playing around with it, trying to deploy little pieces of software running on top and kind of starting to experiment. And in a couple of days, you are actually quite proficient already with Kubernetes, I would say, just by doing a little bit of exploration and trying out different things.
All right, just jump in the deep end of the pool and
absolutely
do a little hands-on learning. All right,
there is no shallow end. There is no shallow end.
All right, hey Mishka, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Well, that's a wrap for this edition of TechStrong TV. Again, I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps. I'm sitting in for Alan Schimmel. Thank you all for joining me today. Quick reminder, we have a virtual summit coming up on Thursday, October 1st. Worth checking out. It's called Operationalizing Cloud Native with Kubernetes. Kicks off at 10 a.m. Eastern. Definitely worth checking out. We'll be back on Friday with another edition of TechStrong TV. So please come on back then. And until then, please be safe.